tear, it falls and hits the ground. A tree, it falls without a sound. A bird, it calls and sends you home. A man, he sits in the cold all alone.
Hi, Tanya. Welcome to the Joy of Sunflowers. Thank you so much for joining me. Please introduce yourself a little bit more.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Tanya Jacoby, and I live in Connecticut in the United States. I live with my husband. I have two living children. I have a daughter in heaven, and we also have a dog and two cats. So it's a full house. And then a little bit about our story. So in 2020, I got pregnant for the third time. I had a miscarriage back in 2018, and then went on to have my first daughter, Kinsley, in 2019. So again, coming off of that, I was pregnant in 2020, and it was considered high risk just because with Kinsley, they didn't really know, coming off a miscarriage and then some complications with her, if it was just my body not being able to kind of go through a quote unquote normal pregnancy. So they monitored us really closely with this one, and they were going to do it up until about 23, 24 weeks, about the same time that my daughter Kinsley started having complications. So at that point, if they didn't start seeing anything, if tests were coming back okay, ultrasounds were coming back okay, we were going to go to the rest of the pregnancy as normal, quote unquote. And so at that point, we were being monitored by our OBGYN team, our MFMs, and everything had looked okay. So we went on with the pregnancy. There wasn't anything too exciting to report. Normal, like everyday pains and ligament pains and things of that. But again, in the pregnancy world, quote unquote, a normal pregnancy. From that point on, we had hit 40 weeks, and at that point they just said, we're going to monitor, and we'll see, and if she doesn't come, then we'll talk about an induction, but we're not there yet. So I remember looking at my husband and saying, okay, we'll just take this day by day. People go past 40 weeks all the time. And it was a Saturday night going into Sunday morning, and I just didn't feel well. I didn't know at the time that it was early contractions, but I couldn't go back to sleep. So, I was tossing and turning. I finally woke back up, called the hospital, told my husband, yeah, we should head over. I think it is early contractions. As we were getting my daughter, Kinsley, to my sister's, the contractions started to get more intensified. So I knew I was getting ready to be in active labor. And I remember us being in the car, excited, talking about how we were going to have our second child, hopefully in the next 24 hours. And how exciting it would be to bring her home to meet her big sister, Kinsley. We were still in the height of the pandemic, so our hospital wasn't allowing the spouse or partner to come up at first. So my husband had to wait downstairs while I got checked in upstairs, and I had to get a COVID test. So once everything was okay with that, I got checked into the room, and they started doing the normal things to prep for labor. So I was in the room with a nurse, and she had told me that we were going to check her, by doing the belly Doppler. And at that point, I felt something was wrong. The nurse was taking quite some time to find her heartbeat, and I couldn't hear anything. and she had just chalked it up as, oh, like the baby must be hiding. But at that point, my mom instincts kicked in, and I knew something was definitely wrong, for a baby at 40 weeks, 4 days to not be able to hear anything or not to be able to feel her move. I was panic stricken. So at that point, she had gone out, got the ultrasound, was ready to get the doctor who was on to come in as well. And when she had put the Doppler from the ultrasound on, I saw our baby girl, and she wasn't moving. And so my heart dropped, and the doctor had come back in, and I heard the dreaded words that a lot of people, those really dreaded words of, I'm so sorry, there's no heartbeat. And at this time, my husband was still not in the room. So I hysterically, as anybody would, started crying and didn't believe that this was happening and that this could happen. So I called him and told him he needed to get upstairs right away and explained to him what they had told me. As I was in active labor, things were happening super fast, as we were being told that there's a good chance that we won't know what has happened to our daughter. And a lot of times with stillbirths, you don't know. And they had talked about the quick options after like autopsies and things of that nature. But I was in, again, full-blown labor, ready to deliver her within those few hours. And we did, a few hours later, and her name is Ryleigh Sienna, and she was beautiful. And we were able to spend a couple of hours with her, not nearly as enough time that I would have wanted to. And so in those moments, we got to say hello, and we got to say our goodbyes and kind of leave the hospital, which was such a dark moment of leaving the hospital without your baby, from the maternity ward. It's not supposed to happen that way. And just remember going home and living this new life of navigating life after stillbirth and also parenting a living child, from at home.
Yeah, it's a roller coaster of a journey that you've been through. And going from, you said, you had an earlier loss, seven weeks, I think there is obviously a very big difference between going through an early loss and then going through a stillborn experience. And I mean, how has that differed for you? Because obviously you've said, you went from parenting, after a miscarriage to then having to parent after a stillborn. So I'm guessing there was a big difference in terms of how that felt and how you functioned.
Yeah, totally. I remember with the miscarriage, I think at that time, knowing that was, again, I think being naive, but more common. People still talked about miscarriages a little bit more. I know it's still kind of taboo, from many years ago where our parents or their parents' generation just didn't talk about it. But yeah, being 7 weeks, and thinking like, that was also, and it was the end of the world, that I wasn't going to be able to be a parent. Like this was going to be a struggle, that, it took us a while to get pregnant and to lose that baby at 7 weeks. My world came crashing in then too, being told that, are you sure you're pregnant? Are you sure you saw those lines? And, watching the HCG levels not rise and, having a negative pregnancy test. It was so hurtful, to think that I would never be a parent, or that there was going to be struggles to get pregnant. And then going through a pregnancy with Kinsley, where that was super complicated, but I think it goes back to being naive. I was so naive still in that, even though we were being monitored with her every week. And, you know, I look back at it now and I just think Kinsley really wanted to just be out in the world. And she was just a fighter. You know, she just wanted to come early. But so, you know, everything with her luckily was okay. And I didn't think anything of it. I didn't bat an eye when doctors told me we were going to be monitored weekly or that we had to see an MFM. And I don't know why it didn't cross my mind then. So to go from that to then with Ryleigh, knowing that there could be complications and things of that, and still kind of going through that pregnancy, not walking on pins and needles, just thinking everything was going to be okay and everything was going to work out, and it worked out with Kinsley, so why wouldn't it have worked out with her? And to be told at full term that your child, you know, is going to be born still. And I don't know if it were like lucky is not the word, but I do have a clear understanding of why she passed away, and it was due to a cord accident. That I just think when my contractions had started on Saturday night into Sunday morning, she, for whatever reason, was tangled. And when the contractions started, it just cut off her oxygen. So that was super tough too, because I always wanted to know. And I know a lot of times parents don't know, because in that moment, I remember turning to the doctor and saying, it must have been something I did. It had to be, like, how could this happen at 40 weeks and 4 days? Like, people deliver at 40 weeks, people deliver at 41 weeks, 42 is so rare, but they do. And the babies are so healthy. So for me, that's where my mind went right away, is that it had to be something I did. Like, it had to be something I ate, or it had to be like a movement I did. And I remember them telling me, like, no, it wasn't anything. And then when we delivered her, yeah, they had told us, and we saw. And so it was tough. It was extremely tough to kind of go through that whole world with 3 very different pregnancies. And then to make even more complicated, this past year, I had a pregnancy after loss, and I gave birth to my son Chase in September. And so going on a 4th pregnancy, and just that was the second hardest thing from losing Ryleigh, was to have a pregnancy after loss, and just every day, you know, trying to be happy to carry him, even though I was scared so much, because I knew that it wasn't a guarantee. It didn't matter. It could have happened at 7 weeks, or it could have happened at 40 plus weeks.
Yeah, it's like there's no moment where you're like, oh, it's okay now. The baby's okay now. Like, the baby's gonna make it now. You know, it's, you know, and that whole sort of you know, oh, you've passed the first trimester, or oh, you're past viability week, and it's just like, none of that means squat.
No.
Been through.
No. And I learned that the super hard way, that for years, that's what we're told, exactly to what your point is, that you'll get through the first trimester, or like, again, get halfway, and oh yeah, you know, you hit 12 weeks and everything's gonna be okay. And that just gets completely thrown out. And you just worry from every little second, every little thing, like, you know, are they moving, or hearing other, you know, lost parent stories. We had connected with a lot of other people after we lost Ryleigh, and people that we're still really great friends with to this day. And hearing their children and their baby stories. And I remember that always being in the back of my head when I was pregnant with Chase, and thinking, okay, well, if it's not going to be an umbilical cord, like, is it going to be something else? Like, and it was so hard. It was so hard every day to put one foot in front of the other, and to be positive that this was going to be another viable pregnancy, that I was going to, me and my husband were going to be able to have another living child. And I just remember telling him, and I think he agrees, that until we had him safely in our arms and out of the hospital, like even to the point of like, I want to be leaving the hospital with our baby and at home, like that to me is going to be our story after losing Ryleigh. I knew there wasn't any guarantee at that point if we were still there, and still to this day, I know that. I know after going through a loss there are other things, but trying to choose, hope and go, like I said, every foot in front of the other every day is the best that we can possibly do.
Yeah. Yeah, I think as well, like when it comes to loss and pregnancy after loss specifically, I mean, you meet so many people, like you said, and pretty much everyone, I mean, every week of pregnancy, someone's lost a child, right? So then you're like, well, there's a story for every week. So then you're just like, okay, I've reached this week. Oh, okay, I'm over this week. Okay. And it's just like every week you're on a cliffhanger because you're like, am I going to make it through this week? Am I going to get to the next week? And I don't know about you, but I had a lot of like, oh, if the baby's born, if we have the baby, it's not when, and I have 3 kids, and the first 3 kids, it was when. It was all when, when they're born. And then I had 2 losses, and now it's if. Now it's if. It's always if.
But no, it was totally if, like it, and I remember always trying to like bridge that gap because I wanted Chase to be able to like feel that love and that joy that I had with Kinsley and Ryleigh, and to not be robbed of it. And it was hard because I did feel robbed of it. Being pregnant after a loss, that your innocence is gone. There's the innocence of pregnancy is stripped. And so I remember being in the waiting rooms, we were going weekly and we had so many appointments, and just seeing all the happy like parents and couples. And I wanted that again. I wanted to like feel that joy that everybody felt. And it just was so hard. And to your point, it was if he comes, or if we like get to that point, if Kinsley has another living sibling, like it's the hardest thing, like I said, after losing Ryleigh.
Yeah, no, it's pregnancy after loss is such a minefield, and it's everything. Like, oh, I have a little bit of gut pain. Is the baby okay? Oh, I stubbed my toe. Did I stress out too much when I did that?
Yes, totally. Yeah, it was everything. Like, and yeah, you just drive yourself crazy about it. And yeah, it was hard because to that point too, I was like, well, I can't stress. Like there's nothing. And I had to keep telling myself, like, we've been through it. So even in that moment too, like knowing that it was a cord accident and replaying it in my mind for so many months after, especially in that first year of like going back and forth. I'm like, well, what could I have done this? Or like, what if I did this? And, being able to really look back and be like, none of it would have been, I wouldn't have been able to, I wouldn't have known. And it took a really long time for me to get to that point. Because I just thought, well, I could have saved her, or I could have done this. And it just, in reality, it just wasn't going to be.
No. And I mean, this is the thing as well, with that kind of case, we really have no control. Like our contractions just happen. Like there's no, you can't stop a contraction. You can try laying down, but then that's not really gonna, if the contractions are coming, they're coming. And it doesn't matter if you lay down, you like take it easy, get in the warm bath, like it can slow them down sometimes, but it's not going to stop them from coming. So
exactly,
they're really, like in your scenario, there really isn't anything that you could have possibly done. Like that you just, it just
No.
sucks. It sucks.
Yeah, it does. And that's exactly what my husband and I, we've come to that conclusion. Like, it's just really shitty. Like, it was shitty. It was shitty luck. It was just like really bad for everything, and more than anything for her life to be cut short that way. I think that's the saddest part of it all. And even for my daughter too, to try to be able to explain to an almost yeah, I guess she would have been almost 2 at that point. We didn't really know like what to do. And it is true, like everybody grieves differently, and my husband grieved differently than I did. And I was the one ready and willing to like share our story and talk about it, because in a lot of circumstances it was still taboo. People didn't talk about it, or they swept it underneath the rug. And I remember for that first week being like, well, people knew that we were pregnant and that I was at 40 weeks. And now all of a sudden, we're going on 41. And there's, I had announced everything with Kinsley and all that stuff and was pretty open about everything. And so I had decided, and I told my husband, I said, I'm going to start sharing, and this is going to be my way to talk about it and honor her, and for me to kind of grieve through this. And from that day on too, I had always talked to Kinsley about it. I wanted her to know right away, to explain to a 2-year-old as best as I possibly could in that moment, what had happened to her sister and why her sister wasn't going to be able to come home. And I'm glad I did, because now with her being almost 4, she talks freely about Ryleigh, and she does things to like help us honor her, and we do walks and we include her in holidays, and she's just part of our life. She's a part of our everyday. And I'm so glad that I did do that with her. And I know she'll talk about it, and she'll probably be the first to explain everything to Chase too. And so I am glad looking back on it. And I know Ken is now too. Because at the time he couldn't talk to Kinsley about it. It just hurt him way too much in that moment to do so.
Yeah, I mean, it's my husband didn't really feel much with our losses, but it wasn't stillborn. It was a very early loss. He didn't see it. We didn't even get to see anything. Like, it was all either like I had a blighted ovum for the first, and then for the second one we just didn't see anything. So he never really connected at all. So I find a lot when it comes to men, especially with stillborn, they tend to connect a lot more to the baby and to the loss and understand the loss. Whereas if it's an earlier loss, they don't connect as well, and especially if they haven't seen like an ultrasound or something like that. It's really hard, obviously, for them to connect, because obviously it's in our bodies, so we connect with it in a way. But for them, yeah, it's a lot harder. So I mean, if he's okay with you talking about it, how did he go with everything, and how did your relationship go? Because I know a lot of people can find it quite trying, going through that time of loss.
Yeah, I agree with you, especially with the early losses. When we had our miscarriage, I don't, not that it didn't affect Ken, but it was different. To your point too, and like your husband, what you had just said, he didn't feel connected. It was only 7 weeks in, and I was the one going to the doctor's appointment being told that, yeah, your levels aren't there, and we're getting negative pregnancy tests. So, you've miscarried. And he was positive in the sense of like, well, we're going to try, we're going to just keep trying and doing that. Versus when we lost Ryleigh, yeah, being able to hold her and have her there in our room. And in those moments, we had to quickly say hi and quickly say our goodbyes forever. So I think for us, going back to the point of us grieving differently, yeah, I came home and I just remember that first week being like, how do we navigate this? How do we navigate parenting a living child at the same time, also grieving Ryleigh. Like we had to get up every single day. We had to take care of our toddler. And that was tough because there was definitely days where I know both of us, if we could have stayed in bed and not have done anything, I think we totally would have. And so we did, we put, each day was really tough to put one foot in front of the other. And like I said, I was more open and willing to talk to anyone and everyone about her and our story and kind of my grieving process each month, like what it felt like, what I was feeling, what I'm sure other lost parents, especially other lost moms, were going through too. Because I remember in that moment feeling really alone after like leaving the hospital and being like, where do I turn? Like you hear about it. And I remember hearing about it. But thinking back to like, to what it was is like, well, it never, it didn't happen to us. So it just never clicked. It never connected. And then when it did, I was like, oh my gosh. And when I had posted us losing her and the day that she was born, so many people that I grew up with or went to high school with or college or worked with were reaching out separately and messaging me and saying like, I know somebody, or I went through. And that at that point I had told my husband, I'm like, this is why I'm doing it, because there's so many people that wouldn't have shared their story because they want, it was hard for them and they just bottled it up. And for me, it just wasn't the way I wanted to process my grief. I wanted to talk about her and I wanted to help other people because I had felt so alone in that moment. And for him, it was different for him. He couldn't mention Ryleigh's name in front of Kinsley. He would talk about it with other people. And we found support groups, and that was very therapeutic for him. I know sometimes for men specifically, it's tough. It's tough to share those feelings and get in those groups. And it took him a little bit, but listening to other stories and hearing other couples and parents and dad specifically, I think gave him the voice of at least sharing Ryleigh's story and to be able to do it. It was more at the home situation where he couldn't talk to Kinsley about it. We had Ryleigh's nursery door closed for, I want to say, a year and a half. And he could not open it. And I remember taking Kinsley in there a lot sooner than he had ever stepped in there. And so going through the stuff, because she was a part of it. She was a part of helping us get that room together. And she would jump like in the crib and she'd look at the stuffed animals. And yeah, it was something that she remembered. And she was like, I want to go into Ryleigh's room. So that was like our time away and kind of like her way to kind of grieve through it too. And Ken wasn't able to walk into that room, I want to say, until I was maybe 6 or 7 months pregnant with Chase. And where I told him, I was like, we gotta have to confront this. That's where Chase is going. And the one part that I had said to Ken that I needed definitely help with that I couldn't do by myself and I knew it was going to be really tough was to remove Ryleigh's clothes out of there and not get rid of them, but just pack them away. And I had said to him, I said, I can't do this without you. And so that was tough. And I think for both of us in that moment, we were trying to choose joy and hope because we wanted to be able to bring Chase home. And it was so tough for us because we had everything there for Ryleigh and we couldn't bring her home. So I think for us, that year and a half was just a lot of first, us dealing with, first Mother's Day, first Father's Day, first birthday. Like we grieved differently for her birthday. I remember being like, we're going to bake her a cake and we're going to, celebrate. And he was like, it's not a celebration. Like we were just on two different wavelengths. And it was rocky for our marriage at certain things, because I think we both were so angry at points, and also trying to take care of Kinsley and also think about the future of, were we going to try again? And I know, he was definitely more willing in the beginning, and definitely was always on board with me of like what I wanted to do. But those couple months after, I just remember telling myself, there's no way. There's no way I can do this. There's no way I can go through this entire process again and get to potentially full term, and no, or whatever, like we talked about, it doesn't matter. It could be 5 weeks, 6 weeks, 7 weeks, or it could be 40 weeks. There was no guarantee at that moment. So it did take a toll on us. And I think we still every day it's challenging, trying to what works for us and how it works with parenting our living children, and how do we incorporate Ryleigh where both of us, are honoring her. And I think we decided to do the charity because that was a way to honor her and also give back to other couples and parents experiencing losses like we have.
Yeah. I think it's so beautiful that you guys are doing something with that, and I mean, yeah, just you talking about going into that room, like it caught me as well. Emotionally, because
I'm sorry. I was like trying to hold back tears.
Because it's like a time warp,
Yeah.
because it's frozen in time, because obviously you had it all set up, and then, so I totally understand. We only ever did one baby room, and that was for my first son, and he was born, and he's like 7 now, so but
Yeah.
I remember putting that room together, and how excited we were, and all of that. So I understand, like, putting that room together and thinking about the baby that's going to be in there. So I haven't experienced a stillbirth or setting up that room and then not having a baby to put in there. So I don't know that angle, but I can definitely connect with the excitement and the joy and the putting it together and then walking back in there would be, yeah. I've been putting clothes out. I've been trying to like hold on to the joy thing, at 25 weeks, and I've like put some clothes and things, and got it all set up, and we're having a girl. But yeah, obviously, the roller coaster of, is she moving enough? I haven't felt her move for a bit, and it's just this constant thing, and I can totally connect, because I'm like, I don't want to pack those clothes away. Like, I don't want to ever have to do that. And I'm so sorry you had to do that.
I'm so sorry. Like a lot of people have to, and it was just one of those things where I just kept putting off, and it was really tough to, I had been in her room multiple times, like tons of times. It was one of those things. It just was the last piece of that puzzle of like bringing Chase into that room. And I remember talking to our therapist about it as well, and being like, well, it's her room. Like, I don't know how I'm going to ever, have that be his room. Like, it's how do people do that? Like, I don't have an extra room just to be like, that's going to stay her room. It doesn't work like that. And so, I remember saying to her at the time, I was like, I think I'm just going to say it's Ryleigh's and Chase's room. It's Ryleigh's and Chase's. And that's how I navigated it for quite some time. And because just thinking about me, I guess, erasing it, even though like it would never, but it was tough. It was one of those things of where, yeah, I didn't get to bring her home. And then now all of a sudden I'm praying and wishing for this other little baby to be able to like be in there. And what if that doesn't happen? You know, like there was always the what ifs, like what if that doesn't happen? And it was tough. It goes back to like the innocence of pregnancy where, you know, the joys of like buying clothes and getting things ready. And I just, we didn't do that for a while. And that's not my husband and me. We are like plan and do things, like get it all done. And we were such procrastinators, and that just isn't. And I remember us talking about it and having to laugh because we were like, we don't have anything, which is like fine, because at the end of the day, as long as we have a healthy baby to bring home, nothing else matters. Nothing, like everything else we can take care of. And we learned that the really hard way, but it was very different for us. And I remember people saying, and it goes back to like, I wanted Chase to feel that joy and love too, like that I was excited to potentially have him and to bring him into our home and to have him be a part of our family no matter what. And I think I had gotten good advice from one of our therapists of saying, well, would you have changed anything differently with Ryleigh? And I remember saying no. I said no, I would have done the same exact stuff. I would have given her the same love and going wet and got clothes and do that stuff and take my bump photos and all of that. And she's like, well, the thing is, you didn't have control over that. So, and now you really don't have the control over this. Like you're choosing hope over fear. The moment that you wanted to try to conceive again, that's what you're doing. And I think for me, that was like a turning point in the pregnancy of like, okay, I need to try to, and enjoy this as much as I can. And know that if I feel something off or something's wrong, that it's just a phone call away, that my team of doctors is there. And we made sure, when we got pregnant again, that they were going to be on board with us, no matter what we wanted to a certain extent, as long as it was going to be medically safe for the baby and for us, that they were going to do what we needed them to do. And so we were lucky in that sense, that they did.
Yeah. It's a very surreal experience, like going through like pregnancy after loss and going through loss as well. And it's just weird because you meet all these milestones, but then you also don't meet them. Like,
yes.
Yeah, I didn't have a choice but to buy things for the baby because my daughter wanted me to, and she was like, no, she needs clothes, mummy. So I didn't have a choice, and I'd already said yes to her because I was like trying to be, getting myself into that hope mindset. So we have got some clothes, but it is very hard to do that, like to go to the shop and buy something for a child that you have no idea if that child's going to be there. And like boxing up their stuff, that is not something you want to do. So I'm with you. Like, I'd rather just not go shopping.
Yeah. And it was one of those things I'm like, and it was I liked doing that stuff with Kinsley and Ryleigh. And for me, I'm with so many people, it was just not one of my top priorities at the end of the day. It was just surviving every day to get through the next day or get to the next week or get to the next appointment and like be like, okay, made it to that appointment and be like, okay, but then an hour later be like, oh my gosh, now I have to wait, an entire week again to do this. It's scary. It's your mind just goes to a lot of other things, and it goes back to hearing other loss stories or other things that have happened. And it's just hard not to think of the worst case scenario after you've experienced any type of loss.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, you know, when you hear of full term like yourself, like it's just, I mean, I can't even fathom, you know, it takes so much out of your body.
Yeah.
You know, to go through pregnancy. And I hurt like a lot. Like
Yeah.
I've like no abs. My abs have completely separated. Like they won't go back together after babies. You know, I've got the displacement of the pelvis, you know, all those things that we get through pregnancy, and you still get those when you're pregnant and you don't get to take that baby home. And I think, you know, a lot of us forget about how, you know, we've got to look after ourselves after having a loss as well, because it was still a delivery. It was still something our body had to do and go through. How was that time for you with the postpartum? Because I know some women do have a lot of like things like they have their milk come in and all that sort of stuff. So how was that for you? What was your experience?
Yeah. I think that was my anger that came in. I was really upset that, to your point, went full term and delivered Ryleigh, was unable to take her home, and then had to literally go through the whole postpartum. And and the doctors had told us like that my milk was going to come in, and it hadn't for a couple of days. So I was like, oh, maybe, again, naive to the point I'm like, oh, it's not going to come in. And then when it did, I just remember crying because it just hurt so much. And I wasn't in the mindset to pump and to donate. I wish I was able and strong at that point. I look back on it, but where I was grieving, it just wasn't going to be good for me. And so trying to suppress it and trying to have it stop. And I remember calling our doctors and crying and saying there's got to be another way, and just every like remedy that I possibly could to get it. And just being angry. I was so angry at my body for not being able to, even though I know, again, it had nothing to do with me, but in that moment thinking, how the heck did this happen? How am I at this stage right now of going through postpartum and I don't have her here with us? And I remember just, hormones are all over the place and being so emotional from the grief, and it was a lot. And just mad. I was mad at my body. I remember thinking too, like, because I'm unable to exercise when I'm pregnant. That was just one of the things that whenever I did get pregnant, they just said that they thought it did a lot of harm to my body when I am. So they've always just had said like no exercising, like I can go for walks and stuff. But so for me, it was just like I went 9 months without, any of that. And then here I am trying to lose the baby weight after not being able to have like a baby home. And it was really hard. It was the hardest. I would say it was like 6 or 7 months of just me being really mad, angry, upset. And I think that stemmed a lot too of like where I kind of took that out. Not directly at my husband, but in ways like that I was just trying to deal in and cope with everything. That my postpartum body, which I would have been fine with, I think, having Ryleigh here, it would have been different. And instead, like here it was with no baby to take care of, trying to, get rid of my milk that was coming in and hormones that were all over the place and postpartum hair loss and all that stuff, everything that we experience after giving birth, and just not having her. It was really, really hard.
Yeah, I think that's like a lot of the time is the hardest part as well, because it's just like another slap in the face. Like, you know, like a kick in the vagina.
Yeah, it is.
It's like,
It
here, have
was,
some of this.
yep, it was. And it was, I don't know. I just angry. I was so angry at that point, and it just, I remember trying to exercise so much because I just wanted to get rid of
That weight.
all that weight and just like all that, again, not getting rid of Ryleigh, but just everything that was like associated with it afterwards of like, I don't want any part of this. Like, I wanted it to be a bad dream. And I think every day waking up to it and realizing like, no, this happened. Like, this
I think there's a difference between honoring your child and literally having to live in the body that, you know, lost. Because I mean, I found out I was miscarrying at 6 weeks, and I had to sit with that because I decided to go natural, and they said it would take 3 weeks. I had to sit with that until week 14.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
So when I on that journey to that, like, I'm sitting there with all the hormones. They said because it's a blighted ovum, the egg will still grow. They said the sac will still grow. So I'm growing, like, I'm getting fatter. I'm getting all the hormones. I'm having all the sickness. I'm having all the things. So just like with you, with the postpartum, like, you're getting all the symptoms, all the things, you know, the milk, everything. So I was getting all the symptoms of being sick and pregnant in the first trimester and getting fat and all that. And I'm just like, this is bullcrap. So I am so with you in that mindset. Like, you just get so mad and so angry. And I did fall into a pit, and I let myself fall there. Well, don't know if I let myself fall there. I just did. I just went there. Like, I couldn't really get out. I didn't really have a choice. It was like falling straight down. But I think that, yeah, I mean, we take it in different ways. And, you know, it's like you said, like, you didn't want to donate, and that's normal. Like, you know, I hear of these amazing women who do, and I think, wow, well done. Well done, you. But then I'm like, I don't even know if I'd have the mental strength to pump that, because I've pumped while, you know, having kids, you know, and that's like you said, like, when you've got the baby, it's acceptable. You're like, oh, well, this is just a part of it. It's fine. And it's great. But without the baby, it's like, I don't think I could do that.
No.
You know?
No, I give all the women that do 100% credit, because after, you know, especially after a loss, and to be able to do that, like, there was no way. I know where my mindset was, and I was not anywhere near to be able to do that and to continually pump. And I remember one of the OBGYNs in our practice being like, because I had called her and I was like, what if I just like do it a little bit? And she's like, no, because you know what's going to happen. Like, it's just going to continue to come in. And so she was like, you can't. She's like, I know you want to relieve. And I was like, that's the main thing. And she was like, just, it won't though. You know that. And it was true. I knew if I had gone down that path, I don't know. I don't know what feelings and what emotions would have emerged. But I do know, looking back at it now, it wouldn't have been healthy for me. It just wasn't a good fit for me.
No, and you would have produced for longer. You would have kept the body, possibly kept the body for longer. I know.
Oh yeah. No, definitely. I do. So yeah, I would have.
Breastfeeding helps the womb contract and everything back, but it's breastfeeding as in, like, physically, because you get all the hormones and all the like things. So it's not. I don't think it really works in the same way if you're pumping. To like contract the womb back. So it's not. Yeah. It's a crappy thing. So she said not to pump because it would make her.
No, she was like, at that point, it was just one of those nights where I just, being so engorged and just so uncomfortable. And yeah, it just goes back to like, this shouldn't be happening. Like, I shouldn't be feeling this way and not have Ryleigh here with us. Like, this is a huge slap in my face at the end of the day of like, yeah, you just were pregnant, for 9 months, carried her, and now at the end of the day, you have milk coming in that you can't give to a baby. It was just really, oh God, it was the hardest postpartum. I think, it goes back to in those moments too. Definitely, it took me a while to even get on board with wanting to try again. Because I remember being in that hospital and, hearing from the nurses and, I've delivered at the same hospital for all of my kids, and having the same teams and same nurses and stuff. And those nurses then saying, kind of like comeback stories or, pregnancies after losses. And I remember turning to my husband and being like, I'm not doing this again. Like, this is like, I was just like in that moment, I'm like, I'm not doing it. I'm like, how could anyone ever do this? And I just was so upset at that time. And it took a really long time for me to even think of trying to get pregnant again and to go through all of that.
I've heard this from so many women, and I don't understand why healthcare professionals say these things like right after you've had a loss. Like, I don't get it. Like, why? Oh, you're fertile now. You're more fertile than before. Oh, well, lots of women have babies after this. Well, lots of women have a baby the first time and don't have a loss. So do you want to tell me some more?
Yeah, it's so true. When we hear, and it's tough, and I'm sure other lost parents feel this way too, and I'm sure you have as well. It's just like when I hear pregnancy announcements, the first thing that I think of is I'm like, well, I hope you get to take that baby home. Like that's the thing. I won't ever say it, but like in my head, that's like one of the first things I think of. I'm like, well, I'm praying, I'm praying that you're able to bring that baby home. And a lot of the times people are, but then a lot of times there aren't. And there's this like two different spectrums to it. And it goes back to, I wish, that wasn't stripped of me and other people and also people like yourself too, that to go through that, because it truly is a blessing to be able to have a baby come home and to be healthy, or to have a really healthy pregnancy and not have like any of the complications or the worries, and to, kind of know everything's going to be okay, in quotes, because until it happens to you, everyone just kind of thinks like, oh yeah, you'll just be a mom to be, or yeah, you'll be a dad to be, or yeah, you'll be parents. And I wish I could have that back. It's just unfortunately has been stripped.
Yeah, I mean, there's some really crappy like things, obviously, with loss, but then I also find that there's some beautiful things in there. Like, it's horrible to say, I know, but like there is some like beautiful things that come with loss, and that is like the love and the compassion.
Yeah.
And the understanding of what a blessing is, and the understanding of what a miracle is. Mm-hmm. Like, you don't know that before you go through a loss. You just don't. Like, I had 3 kids and I was like, yeah, I did the thing. I have kids.
Yeah.
And then I had losses, and now I'm like, they're the most precious thing in the world. Like,
yeah.
Don't hurt yourself. I mean, I was saying that to them before anyway. I said, don't hurt yourself. I can't make another one with you. And it was kind of like a saying, and I kind of said it almost blasé in a sense. Yeah. But now I say it with vigor. I'm like, I can't make another one of you, so don't do it. Like,
yeah. No, you're right. Ken and I, we have said that we're always been like passionate people and like understanding and go-getters, but with the loss of Ryleigh, it changed everything. The amount of joy that we have for our living children. And again, with any parenting, there goes, there's tough days. Like that doesn't bypass anything, but there's just other things that I take a step back and just remember, well, I'm lucky enough to be able to do this. There are some parents out there that are going to try to be parents that don't even get to this point. So to be able to have these experiences and go through this, you're right. The love, yeah, it's hard to explain, but after a loss, it's just totally different.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I've talked to quite a lot of women who, some of them haven't accepted the change in themselves, and then some of them have. And the ones that have, there's this real like contentment, like just this kind of calm. And I feel like I'm sort of getting there, and I really like that. Like I really love that. And I'm like, well, I didn't want to have gone through what I've gone through, but I'm glad that something good can be there.
Yep.
After
Yeah.
something horrible. So it's been, very eye-opening doing this event, because I did start very like angry, very upset, very, and as I've gone through, I've kind of become more connected and more okay about who I am now and what I'm like.
Yeah, I would agree with you with that. I think the moment that Ryleigh was born and we lost her, I became a different person. And I remember knowing that as like the months went on and as we started going through, but being almost now 2 years coming up on her birthday, totally. I know I'm a totally different person. I know I have a totally different outlook on life. I think that's a good point that you brought up too about just calm. I think there's a lot of things that I'm able to take a step back and just really look at it and say, is this really worth like getting like hyped up about? Or does that really matter at the end of the day? And just knowing what does and what doesn't anymore, or the people that I choose to kind of come into my life. And I know that's a big thing too at loss is what friends kind of come in and out, what family members are there for you and all of that. And I remember people saying it. I didn't believe it at first. I don't think I wanted to believe it that things were going to change, or the people that you thought were going to be there for you were going to be. But then in reality, it's the people that you would never have thought that were there, who showed up, that talk about Ryleigh, who honor her every day with like, it was one of those things that, things changed and I became different. Not for better, not for worse, just different. And just the way that we kind of like look at life, going forward and how we want to live our life, because knowing that even our life is super precious, that, something that we didn't think was going to happen to us did happen to us. So trying to like live to the fullest and to be able to help other people and other lost families, and to do that while we honor her. Just one of the things that I kind of strive for to do every day now, because it's sad and it does happen a lot. And being 2 years removed from the day that we got to say hi to her and goodbye, I never thought I would have gone to the point where I am now. I would have never thought to be, talking about her and sharing her story. And I just, those first few days, weeks, months leading up to it, after it was, I didn't think. I thought, my life was going to be completely over and that there was no way of coming back from this. And how could I? But people said it. and it is true. It's just, the journey of grief is a roller coaster. There's so many ups and downs, and, it doesn't get easier or better. It's just different. And you kind of are able to carry them on with you, for the rest of the time that we're here.
Yeah. No, it's honoring them is such a sort of tricky thing. Like you kind of have to really think about how you want to do it. Like if you're going to do, like, I always put it this way, like the sad thing or like the joy thing.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you're either like doing like a mourn type, wake thing, or you're doing like a celebration birthday thing. We the last so for the first birthday of our first loss, we stood outside, looked up at the stars, and we said, we hope that you're okay in heaven. And like it was all like me and the 3 kids and my husband, and we all just had like a group hug. And it was really beautiful, but really, really sad. And I was like, I want to do something nice, like fun next year for a birthday. And I said, hey guys, should we have a birthday party for Joy? And they were like, yeah, like obviously involved. So, but it was just really nice to kind of like have that moment with the kids and have them want to be part of it and want to be in it. And yeah, I mean, my husband's like, oh, I don't mind whatever we do. Like, I'll be involved, but like, whatever. I'm like, great. Okay. Well, you're on this roller coaster with me regardless. You can. Yeah. So when I told him I was doing this, he's just like, okay. How many women? I'm like, between 70 and 100. And he's just like, okay. Yeah, you can do that. But I think we do take them for a ride a lot of the time when we're emotional. But I said to him, like, yeah, birthday, we'll do a party thing, and we'll have like,
I love that.
Yeah. I feel weird as well, but I'm like, but I don't know, I'd feel weird if I didn't. Like, I feel weird if I do. I feel weird if I didn't. So
yeah, no, there's so many things. The honoring part. Oh, I remember being in the hospital, and that was the one thing I had said. I was like, I don't know what that looks like, and I don't know what that means yet, but I know there's like something to come out of this with Ryleigh and us. And to that point too, my husband was like, all right, well, yeah, I don't know what you're thinking. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm thinking either. Like, I'm just saying there's going to be something. And I don't know what that is. But I know I want to eventually. And I hope I can get to that point. And yeah, I think the birthday party, that's like with Kinsley, when we did it last year, like she was so excited to bake a birthday cake. And I didn't want it to be like a sad thing always. There are like, we have those tough conversations, like, and it can get sad, or it can be like, oh my God, I can't believe, at the time, like my 2.5-year-old said that, or like, how do I respond back to that? Or how do I explain, this or whatever. So yeah, for us, same. I was just like, I want it to be a happy thing. And she's excited this year too. She's like, can we bake another birthday cake? And I said, yeah, of course. And talking about like what flavor, like frosting or sprinkles. And so I want it to be a happy time for her too, as well. And then as Chase gets older as well, like he'll
join in.
Yeah, he'll just know it from day one. And like I said, I think it'll just be a natural thing, not even coming from Ken and I, it'll be from Kinsley explaining like who Ryleigh is and what that looks like. And I think it'll be interesting. I know I've talked to other lost parents about this, but with Chase being, the sibling after Ryleigh, not that, it's the secret in the room, but it also goes back to, we wouldn't have had Chase. Like he wouldn't have been here. You know, maybe we would have had another child, but it wouldn't have been exactly Chase and in that moment. So it's tough. It's one of those things where my husband definitely looks at that more, and he'll say that, he'll be like, but Chase wouldn't be here. And I'm like, I know, but it's also hard for me to not picture Ryleigh here too. And I know that wouldn't have worked out both ways.
Yeah.
But it's tricky. It's so tricky, the whole thing of it. And I think as the years go on, it gets sometimes trickier. Like I know I felt that in year 2, grief. The first year of grief was all those firsts and getting through the first and trying to navigate and then going through the pregnancy after loss. And now we're going on year 2, and it's just another year kind of removed from that day, where I feel like further from it. And just, well, the days go on and the years go on, and it's not like me saying, well, last year we lost Derek. It's like not that anymore. So it was definitely.
I think for your case as well, like, because you have had another pregnancy, you know, that's a whole nother level on top. That's a whole nother layer. And I think, like, obviously, you know, time, I've heard a lot of people say the time thing, you know, works to kind of help you heal and help you move. And I know you said, you know, it's harder sometimes, and it makes sense that it would be harder because you went through another season of reliving the entire process of what led to Ryleigh. So when you go through those processes, you know, that's trauma, and that's something, you know, that you're going through. So it makes sense that it would still be really difficult because you still haven't had that time where it's just time, you know. So give yourself credit. Like, you're doing really well. Like, it's like, it's hard.
No, you make a good point. It was tough. It's hard to put into words this year. I don't know. And I say that to my husband all the time. I'm like, I don't know. Year 2 grief is like, it's hitting differently. It's really, really tricky. And the holidays, for whatever reason, again, like I'm so happy that Chase was here, but it's tough to like get excited for it. And I had said that to my husband, and I was like, I don't know why. I'm like, I can't pinpoint it, but I'm like, it's tricky. I'm like, because I'm trying to be happy for Kinsley and Chase. It's his, you know, his first one, and I'm so fortunate to have him here, but it still just looked different. It's still, I mean, there was like,
like, didn't you, I mean, you pictured a certain thing with Ryleigh, and then you have Chase, you don't have Ryleigh, you know, so that you have to deal with that. And obviously, you know, that makes sense. That makes sense that it would feel weird. It would feel surreal because you've got a baby that you didn't know that you'd have. And, you know, you were worried about it all that time, and then you've got the baby, and then you're like, oh, okay.
We're here. You're right. It's just like, okay, we're here. Like we did it, and we survived a pregnancy after loss, and we didn't think we were going. We didn't think we were going to like at all. You know, every day, like, we can't get through this, but we did. And it's weird. But you know, it's the journey of grief. It's like I said, it's just there always will be something, and it'll always be like a new way to kind of navigate it and to figure that out. And I'm sure as like my kids get older too, there'll be like new pieces and to it. So
I mean, again, you're still going to reach milestones, and you're still going to have those moments. I mean, I met a lady who's 20 years on, and she said, you know, it gets so much easier. She was like, you know, it feels hard now, it feels tough now. She said, but it gets easier. And with time, you know, you don't think as often. Like, you still think, you still honor, but you don't live in it, you know. But
That's a
again,
good way to put it.
yeah, but again, like you know, give yourself credit. You're going through those moments, and you know, you've put him in the room you were gonna put her in, you know. So all
Yeah.
these things, these are layers that you're then having to work through. So that's, you know, you're doing amazing. Like, you know,
Yeah.
you're gonna get through this year, and then, you know, then you're going to have the rest of the time to get to that 20-year mark where you're like, yeah, I feel okay. Like, you know, you're
Yeah.
gonna get there. It's just,
Yeah.
you've just been through the seasons again, you know. So you just until you're past, you know, having babies and doing those things and going through those moments, you know, you're gonna have to occasionally relive it. Like, that is the thing about pregnancy after loss. I was not prepared for. I did not know. I was like, all I need to do is get pregnant. All I have to do is have a baby. And then you get pregnant and you're like, oh my gosh, this is horrible. This sucks. This is so hard. Like,
Yes.
I'm terrified all the time.
Yeah. You're so right. It is. You're like petrified of it. And yeah, I remember saying that to our doctors too. I'm like, how do like people do this? Like, I don't, I'm like, it's awful. Like every week going and like you're on pins and needles, you know, like leading up to it. You're like, oh my gosh, okay, is like everything okay? Am I gonna get like good news? Am I gonna get bad news today? Like,
Yeah.
am I leaving this appointment like all right and hopeful or
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I'm not seen as high risk, so I just avoid the doctors. I'm like, if I don't set up a scheduled appointment, I don't have to worry about it. And I could just be like, whatever. You know? And if I
Yeah.
don't feel the baby like today, like I haven't felt the baby last night, so then I'm like, okay, well, I can freak out, or I can, you know, give it 24 hours or so and see what happens. I felt a kick a few times while we were talking, so who
Okay.
knows? Just
Okay. Okay.
not as strong, not as, you know. Maybe I should just have some sugar or some like juice or something, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, so I think, yeah, it's just insane. Like, you're right. But I think a lot of us just go into it because we don't know. And then that's how we
Yeah.
make it through, because we don't know. We do the thing, or we go through the treatments, it happens, and then it's like, well, you can't go back anyway. It's happening, so you're in it.
Yeah. That's exactly what it was. And
Oh,
I don't know. I don't remember. I don't know what like clicked one day where I was like, okay, like, you know, we're gonna try. I think it was just like, well, you like the worst has already happened, like at this point. So if we want to be able to grow our family, there's no other, you know, there are other ways, but if I
yeah.
want to try naturally, this is the way that it's gonna have to be. And it's gonna have to choose that the hope over fear. And you know, whatever happens, happens. And to be able to know that, and yes, it would be shitty. And to kind of go through all of that again. And I know there are, you know, everyone, like you said too, just multiple losses, like before being able to get pregnant again. And hearing a bunch of the stories like that and knowing, okay, like this, we're going to try, but who knows? You know, we don't know if it'll be viable or what that's going to look like. And if we have to try again, and, you know, it could be a really long road and path ahead. And I think every day that parents or couples or whoever are willing to take that risk, like it says something, to do that, to know that it might not end the way that we want it to end, but we're still doing it. We're still trying and hoping for a really beautiful outcome at the end of the day.
Yeah. I love that, choosing hope over fear. Like, that's so, it's so true. And I've had a few people, speakers who have sort of said that, you know, focusing on hope and being in that and hanging on to those hope moments where you
Yeah.
feel a little glimmer and you're like, oh, you know, I could just grab
Yeah.
it, you know. And sometimes fear gets you and it's like, no,
It
don't touch
does.
that.
It does. Yeah, because it would. There was plenty of times in my pregnancy after Ryleigh that I would start to feel like, like feeling Chase move and be like, oh, okay. Like, and then like, it'd be like at nighttime where I'd panic because that's when the last time or the day before that I had really felt her. And then I would go into panic mode. And my husband had to be the one to be like, okay, take a step back. Like, a lot of people always said it was different pregnancy, right? Different pregnancy. So it's not gonna always be exactly what had happened. So relax, take a second and, before we start freaking out. And yeah, I had to do that quite a bit because I would feel hopeful and then the fear would be right there. And it'd go and my mind would start racing and go to the worst, like possible scenario. And I had to tell myself, like, that's not how it's always going to be. Like, that's not the way that it's going to happen every single time. So, yeah, it's a journey for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's yeah. Crazy, crazy, crazy. But thank you so much for joining me and speaking with me and speaking about your journey and sharing that. And I know that, it's part of your healing, which has been really helpful for you, which is really amazing. But you are helping so many women just by sharing your story. I definitely have been touched by so many women who, when I first came into this space, I didn't know anything about anything except for the miscarriage I had. And then it just opened up a lot to me. And it does bring comfort and just that camaraderie and sisterhood that, just doesn't exist before that moment. So thank you for being one of those voices. And I'm sure there's women who find you first and they're like, I'm not alone, just that moment. And you're giving that to women. And I think that's really lovely and beautiful that, you're bringing that to women who are going through this. Wish we never had to go through it in the first place, but
No, I wish that there were none of us that had to experience this. And I thank you for letting me join you and share our story and share our Ryleigh with everybody and our experience and just to kind of let everyone know that they aren't alone, that the experiences that we have gone through or will go through, that they can turn, and that there are people, there's resources, there are people that will listen, there are people that will help give advice, whatever anyone needs in that moment, there is help. And so even if our story helps one other person, that's why we share. And again, just to share our sweet girl with everybody and to be able to give back.
that's so beautiful. Is there anything that you wanted to say or I don't know, words of advice for anyone who's going through this right now and it's new for them maybe and they're in this season of either pregnancy after loss or they're in the season of loss?
Yeah. I think the best advice that I could give that I was given in the beginning of losing Ryleigh is it does get easier over time. Not that it gets better, not that it gets worse. It gets easier. You're able to find what works for you and your family to honor your babies or your children. And I think the best thing is to really hone in on what that looks like for you as an individual. So for us, it was just being able to share our story and to talk to other lost people, like lost parents. And that gave us comfort. So I think trying to go to support groups or looking at different resources, whatever works for you, give it a try, because you never know where it's going to take you or what other people you're going to meet. And years from now, you'll be able to look back, because I remember thinking I would never be able to look back and to be where I am today. And that was probably the best advice that somebody had told me, is just do what feels right for you in that moment. And for us, it was sharing our story and researching different resources. And that's now what we are doing with our daughter's charity. We want to be able to help give that space. So knowing that it does get easier, I promise. I know it doesn't feel like that in this moment, but it does.
Yeah, that's so lovely. And, I think a lot of women, like when we're going through the loss moment, it feels like it will last forever. But yeah, it's important to remember that it is a moment in time, and however long that lasts is however long it will last for you. But there will be other moments, and there will be joyful moments, and moments that catch you off guard, and you're smiling and you're laughing and you're enjoying
Yes.
enjoying life again.
Yeah, you will be able to find those joyful moments. You will be able to laugh and hopefully do the things that you enjoyed doing before, or find even new things that find joy. And it is a lifelong journey, but it's a journey that you'll be able to look back on and know how far you've come, for sure.
And just one final question, just about your rainbow.
Yeah.
Is there, like, have there been any moments that have been really like beautiful and like joyful completely, like where you didn't have the other like emotions? It was just like you had this joy. Has there been any of that? Something?
Yeah. No, I'm trying to. So, I mean, definitely the first was being in that delivery room again, and delivering Chase and hearing his cry. I think for me, with losing Ryleigh and not being able to hear her cry was always a really, really tough moment, to be back in a delivery room. And that's all I wanted to know, was that my son was breathing. And so to hear his cry and to be placed in my arms was such a huge relief. And it was a joy, the biggest joy of my life, to be able to have him here earthside. And I would say the second part for us was to bring Chase home, to my daughter Kinsley. So, she had experienced losing Ryleigh, and she knows she's a big sister. It wasn't like she was going to become a new big sister. She has her sister Ryleigh in heaven, but to be able to have a living sibling and seeing that bond, and I don't know if it's just because of her losing Ryleigh, their bond is like inseparable. And seeing them laugh together, and Chase absolutely loves Kinsley. Like, he's the one, or she's the one that could make him really laugh. And so to have that bond, I'm so glad that I get to witness that. And I'm so glad that she's able to have a living sibling here. So she has her angel sister, and then she has her brother here with her side. So those are like the two that have brought me complete joy.
Well, that was such a beautiful note to end on. I'm so glad I asked you that, because that's been you think you'll be like not fearful of that, like, will I feel that, but you are, like, when you're pregnant and you're hoping for an angel, not for an angel, you're hoping for a rainbow. Oh my gosh. Hoping for a rainbow. Wow. Yeah, when you're hoping for a rainbow, you just you're like,
Yeah.
well, I don't know what that looks like. I don't know what that's going to be like. So it's nice to hear some of the more joyful moments from that, because I've been told like sometimes it can be very hard, because sometimes they can look like you know, the one we've lost, and that can be really trying. But knowing that you have those joy moments and those, like, you know, and you know, you think that you obviously you have joy moments, like that's just life, you know. But yeah, it's just knowing it's a real reality, just very comforting. So I hope that has brought some of you mamas who are watching, if you are pregnant after loss, I hope that brought you comfort, because I'm with you and I know how you feel. And Tanya has just been through that as well, so she knows how you feel too.
Yeah. No, thanks for asking me that question. No one's asked me that since. So it's I hope that helps even just one person out there who's maybe experiencing a pregnancy after loss.
Yeah. And maybe, like, you know, if you have just had your rainbow, maybe if you're out there and you're listening, you know, maybe like write some things down that you really enjoy, those joyful moments, because you might just like forget about them. Like you might be just in the throes of life, and you know, things might get out of hand. So if you write them down, so then when you are in those darker moments, maybe you can have a look at those joyful moments and be like, this isn't going to last forever, you know. this dark moment is okay, and I can do it. You know, we are amazing women. Like, we can do hard things.
Very hard things.
And, you know, we're still here. So, you know, if we can do it, anyone can do it. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining me. And thank you for doing what you're doing with your charity and honoring Ryleigh so much. And I'm sure she would be looking down and be smiling, and so glad that you're doing what you're doing. So
no, thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Please note that all speakers, including experts and professionals, express information, views, and opinions that should not be used to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any medical conditions. If you have a medical issue, please consult a qualified professional. Speakers voice their own views, opinions, and conclusions, and they may not reflect the views, opinions, and conclusions of other speakers. Ella Rose, The Joy of Sunflowers, and its sponsors may not endorse all or any of the views, opinions, or conclusions expressed.